During the worst snowstorm Chicago had seen in 20 years, a waitress did something no one else would. She sheltered an old woman everyone else ignored. The next day, black SUVs surrounded the diner, and a man with tattoos on his neck and ice in his eyes walked through the door. He was looking for his mother. What he found was the woman who would change everything. The wind howled through the broken seal of Rose's diner like a wounded animal, rattling the windows and sending drafts across the cracked linoleum floor. Outside, Chicago's south side had vanished under a blanket of white, the worst blizzard in 20 years, turning familiar streets into a frozen wasteland. Naomi Thompson wiped down the counter for the 6th time that hour. The dinner rush had never come. She should close early, but something kept her there. The diner was her life now. All that remained of her dreams. Some folks might need shelter, she murmured to herself, her grandmother's words echoing in her memory. You never turn away someone in need. As if summoned by the thought, the door burst open with a gust of snow and frigid air. Naomi looked up, expecting a plow driver stopping for coffee. Instead, she found an elderly white woman stumbling through the entrance. Coat far too thin for the weather. Silver hair wild with snowflakes. Face pale as death. The two men at the counter glanced over, then looked away. An old white woman lost on the south side, someone else's problem. But Naomi was already moving. Oh my God. She caught the woman before she collapsed. Ma'am, are you all right? I got lost, the woman whispered, trembling. I was looking for my son. I can't remember the address. Naomi didn't hesitate. She guided her to the nearest booth, wrapped her own coat around the shaking shoulders, and brought hot soup and tea. Thank you, dear, the woman said as color slowly returned to her cheeks. I'm Dorothy. Dorothy Caldwell. Naomi Thompson. She slid into the booth across from her. You said you were looking for your son. Dorothy's eyes grew distant. I haven't seen him in 7 years. He became someone I didn't recognize after his father died. Her voice cracked. But he's still my boy. Do you have his address? Dorothy produced a crumpled slip of paper. Lakeshore Tower. The penthouse. Naomi's eyebrows rose. Lakeshore Tower was the most exclusive address in Chicago. Whoever Dorothy's son was, he wasn't hurting for money. The roads won't clear until morning, Naomi said gently. You can stay here as long as you need. As the night wore on, Naomi made a bed for Dorothy in the back office. Before she drifted off, the old woman murmured something that sent a chill down Naomi's spine. He runs an organization. A very powerful one. He was such a good boy once. Her eyes closed. I don't know what he is now. Naomi returned to the empty diner, watching snow pile against the windows. She didn't sleep. By morning, the storm had stopped, but what came next was worse. Headlights cut through the gray dawn. Not one car. 3. Massive black SUVs pulling up in perfect formation. Men in dark suits stepped out, scanning the area with cold efficiency. Then the door of the middle SUV opened. And he stepped out. Tall. Imposing. Tattoos crawling up his neck. He moved through the snow like it didn't dare touch him. When the diner door opened, Naomi found herself face to face with the most dangerous man she'd ever seen. Daniel Kwan. Head of the Kwan organization. The man who controlled half of Chicago's underworld. And the son of the woman sleeping in her back office. I'm looking for Dorothy Caldwell, he said, his voice cold and flat. She's here. Naomi straightened, refusing to flinch. She was half frozen when she came in last night. I've been taking care of her. Something flickered in those dark eyes. The coldness cracked, just barely. You took care of her, he repeated slowly. Someone had to. Everyone else looked away. For a long moment, he simply stared at her. Then, quietly, show me to her. And Naomi led the most dangerous man in Chicago to his mother's side, unaware that one act of kindness had just changed everything. Before we dive into this story, drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. This story is going to shake you to your core. So, smash that subscribe because I read every single one comment here, so please drop your comments telling me where you are watching from. Now let's begin. The wind had teeth that night. It tore through Chicago's south side like something hungry, rattling the windows of Rose's diner and finding every crack in the old building's bones. Outside, the world had disappeared. Streets, cars, streetlights, all swallowed by a wall of white that hadn't stopped falling since noon. Naomi Thompson stood behind the counter, watching the storm devour the city. The worst blizzard in 20 years, the news had said. Stay inside. Don't travel. The kind of storm that killed people who didn't listen. She should close up. Mr. Patterson, the owner, had called hours ago and told her to lock the doors, go home, stay safe. But home was a one-bedroom apartment with thin walls and thinner memories, and safe was a word that had stopped meaning anything to her 4 years ago. So she stayed. The diner was quiet now. Her last customer, old Earl, who came every night for pie and stories about his late wife, had finally trudged out into the snow an hour ago. Now it was just Naomi, the hum of the refrigerator, and the howling wind. She wiped down the counter again, not because it needed it, but because her hands needed something to do. Motion kept the thoughts at bay. Motion kept her from remembering. Deshaun would have been 22 this year. Her little brother. The one she'd practically raised after their father left and their mother started working double shifts. The one who used to make her laugh until her stomach hurt. The one who had dreams of becoming a music producer, who used to beatbox in the kitchen while she cooked dinner, who had never hurt anyone in his short, bright life. Dead at 18. Wrong place, wrong time. A bullet meant for someone else found him instead. The medical bills from trying to save him, 3 surgeries, 2 weeks in the ICU, had buried her. $68,000. A number so large it might as well have been $1 million. And then her mother's breakdown, the assisted living facility, the monthly payments that never seemed to shrink no matter how many double shifts Naomi worked. She'd wanted to be a nurse once. Had been accepted into a program, had dreamed of helping people, of making something of herself. But dreams cost money, and money went to debt, and debt went on forever. Now she was 27 years old, working at a diner she didn't own, living a life that felt more like surviving than living. Some folks might need shelter. Her grandmother's voice, soft and steady in her memory. The woman who had raised her mother, who had taught Naomi to cook and pray and never turn away someone in need. That's why she stayed open. Not for herself. For the possibility that someone out there in that frozen hell might need a warm place to land. The door burst open. Naomi's head snapped up, her hand instinctively reaching for the baseball bat she kept under the counter. Chicago's South Side had taught her to be careful. The storm had taught her that desperate people did desperate things. But it wasn't a robber who stumbled through the entrance. It was an old woman. White. Silver hair tangled and wild with snowflakes. Coat far too thin, a fall jacket, maybe, something you'd wear in October, not the middle of a deadly February blizzard. Her face was pale, almost gray, her lips tinged with blue. She swayed in the doorway, one hand clutching the frame like it was the only thing keeping her upright. The 2 men at the counter, Naomi hadn't even realized they were still there, glanced over. Then looked away. An old white woman lost on the south side. That was somebody else's problem. Somebody else's trouble waiting to happen. But Naomi was already moving. Oh my God. She rounded the counter in 3 quick strides, catching the woman just as her knees buckled. Ma'am? Ma'am, can you hear me? The woman's eyes fluttered. Confused. Distant. Like she was seeing something far away. "I got lost," she whispered. Her voice was thin, trembling, barely more than a breath. "I was looking for my son. I can't remember." Okay, it's all right." Naomi guided her toward the nearest booth, her mind already racing. Hypothermia. Early stages, maybe worse. She needed warmth, needed it now. "Let's get you sitting down." She stripped off her own coat. The good one, the one she'd saved 3 months to buy, and wrapped it around the woman's shaking shoulders. Then she grabbed the emergency blanket from under the counter, the one she kept for nights exactly like this, and layered it on top. "I'm going to get you something hot to drink. Don't move, okay? Just breathe." The woman nodded weakly, her eyes still unfocused. Naomi moved fast. Hot water first, tea would take too long. She added honey, pressed the warm mug into the woman's trembling hands, and watched her take a shaky sip. "That's it. Small sips. You're safe now." Color began to creep back into the woman's cheeks. Faint, but there. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you, dear. I'm Dorothy. Dorothy Caldwell. Naomi Thompson." She slid into the booth across from her, keeping her voice calm even as her heart still raced. "Mrs. Caldwell, what were you doing out in this storm? Do you have someone I can call?" Dorothy's brow furrowed. That distant look again, like she was trying to catch something that kept slipping away. "My son," she said slowly. "I was trying to find my son. I haven't seen him in 7 years now." Her voice cracked. "He became someone I didn't recognize after his father died. Built walls around himself. Pushed everyone away." She looked down at her shaking hands. "Even me." Naomi's chest tightened. She knew about walls. Knew about grief that changed people into strangers. "Do you have his address? Maybe I can help you reach him." Dorothy fumbled in her purse, a nice purse, Naomi noticed, expensive leather, out of place with the thin coat, and produced a crumpled slip of paper. "Lakeshore Tower. The penthouse." She frowned. "I was supposed to stay with Margaret, my caretaker. But I just needed to see him. I thought if I surprised him." Naomi took the paper, her eyebrows rising. Lakeshore Tower was on the Gold Coast, the kind of building where apartments cost more than she'd make in 10 lifetimes. Whoever Dorothy's son was, he had money. Serious money. "The roads won't be clear until morning," Naomi said gently. "But you're safe here. I'll make sure you get to him." Dorothy's eyes filled with tears, grateful, exhausted, something deeper. "He was such a good boy once," she whispered. "Kind. Gentle. I don't know what he is now." Her gaze drifted to the snow-covered windows. "I don't know if he'll even want to see me." Naomi reached across the table and took the old woman's hand. "He will," she said quietly. "You're his mother. That has to count for something." Dorothy smiled, fragile, hopeful, heartbreaking. "You have a kind heart, Naomi Thompson. Your mother must be proud." Naomi didn't answer. Some wounds were too fresh to touch, even now. Instead, she helped Dorothy to the back office, made up a bed from old blankets and cushions, and watched the old woman drift into an exhausted sleep. Then she returned to the empty diner, turned off most of the lights, and sat alone in the darkness, listening to the storm rage outside. She didn't know that tomorrow would bring black SUVs and men in dark suits. She didn't know that one act of kindness would pull her into a world she'd spent her whole life avoiding. She didn't know that the old woman sleeping in her back office was the mother of the most dangerous man in Chicago. All she knew was that someone had needed shelter. And she had opened the door. Morning came gray and silent. Naomi hadn't slept. She dozed in one of the booths, her head resting against the cold window, jerking awake every hour to check on Dorothy. The old woman had slept deeply, peacefully, as if the warmth and safety of the diner had given her permission to finally rest. Now sunlight, pale and weak, filtered through the frost-covered windows. The storm had stopped sometime before dawn, leaving behind a city buried under 2 feet of snow. The streets were empty, the cars transformed into white lumps, the world muffled and strange. Naomi stood at the counter, nursing a cup of coffee that had gone cold in her hands. Her body ached from the uncomfortable sleep. Her mind was still turning over Dorothy's words from the night before. He became someone I didn't recognize. She knew that story. Had lived it, in her own way. Grief changed people. Broke them open and let something else crawl inside. She'd seen it happen to her mother after Deshawn died, the light going out behind her eyes, the woman she'd known disappearing piece by piece until only a shell remained. Maybe Dorothy's son was the same. Maybe grief had swallowed him whole. The sound of engines broke the silence. Naomi looked up, frowning. The road shouldn't be clear yet. The plows hadn't even started on the south side, they always did the wealthy neighborhoods first, the Gold Coast and Lincoln Park, before they bothered with places like this. But the sound grew louder. Closer. 3 black SUVs turned onto the street, moving through the snow like it was nothing, their massive tires cutting clean tracks through the white. They pulled up to the diner in perfect formation, 1 in front, 2 flanking, and stopped. Naomi's heart began to pound. Men stepped out. 4 of them, maybe 5. Dark suits beneath heavy coats. They moved with a kind of coordinated precision that made her stomach drop, scanning the street, the buildings, the diner itself with cold, professional eyes. Then the door of the middle SUV opened. And he stepped out. Tall. Imposing. A black coat that probably cost more than her yearly rent. But it was his face that made Naomi's breath catch. Sharp angles, hard jaw, and eyes that looked like they'd seen things that would break a normal person. Dark hair cut short. And there, climbing up the side of his neck and disappearing beneath his collar, the edges of black ink. Tattoos. The kind you earned, not the kind you chose. He moved toward the diner with the easy confidence of a man who had never been afraid of anything in his life. Naomi knew who he was before he even reached the door. Daniel Kwan. Everyone on the south side knew that name. Whispered it in warnings, in prayers, in cautionary tales told to children who stayed out too late. The Kwan organization controlled half of Chicago's underworld, drugs, gambling, protection, things Naomi didn't even want to know about. And Daniel Kwan was the head of it all. The man who made other dangerous men afraid. The bell above the door jingled, a sound so ordinary it felt absurd. And then he was inside, filling the small diner with a presence that made the air feel heavier. His eyes found Naomi immediately. She didn't move. Didn't speak. Couldn't, really. Her hand was frozen on the counter, her heart hammering so hard she could hear it in her ears. "I'm looking for Dorothy Caldwell." His voice was low, controlled, revealing nothing. "She's here." It wasn't a question. Naomi swallowed. "She's in the back. Resting." "Show me." Not a request. An order. But before Naomi could move, a voice came from the hallway. "Daniel?" They both turned. Dorothy stood in the doorway to the back office, wrapped in Naomi's coat, her silver hair disheveled from sleep. But her eyes were clear, focused, and filled with something that looked like hope and heartbreak intertwined. "Mom." The word left Daniel's mouth like it had been dragged out of him, rough and reluctant. Dorothy's face crumpled. "Oh, sweetheart. You came." She moved toward him, unsteady on her feet, and Naomi watched something extraordinary happen. Daniel Kwan, the most feared man in Chicago, caught his mother in his arms like she was made of glass. His jaw was tight, his expression carefully blank, but his hands were gentle as he steadied her. And for just a moment, a single heartbeat, the ice in his eyes cracked. Then it was gone. What were you thinking? His voice was harder now, controlled fury simmering beneath the surface. You could have died out there. Margaret called me at midnight, frantic. I wanted to see you. Dorothy's voice was small but firm. It's been 7 years, Daniel. 7 years. Something passed across his face. Pain, maybe. Guilt. It was there and gone so fast Naomi almost missed it. We'll talk about this later. He was already steering Dorothy toward the door, his men moving to flank them. We need to get you home. Get you checked by a doctor. Wait. Dorothy pulled back, surprisingly strong for her age, and turned to look at Naomi. Daniel, this young woman, she saved my life. Daniel stopped. Turned. Those eyes landed on Naomi again, and this time, he really looked at her. Not through her, not past her, but at her, studying her like she was a puzzle he hadn't expected to find. She gave me her own coat, Dorothy continued, her voice thick with emotion. Fed me. Took care of me all night. Everyone else looked away. But not her. The diner fell silent. The men by the door shifted uncomfortably, clearly unused to standing still. Daniel took a step toward Naomi. Then another. She held her ground, though every instinct screamed at her to back away. You took care of her, he said slowly. A stranger. In this neighborhood. In that storm. She needed help. Naomi was surprised by how steady her voice sounded. That's all. That's not all. His eyes narrowed slightly. That's rare. He reached into his coat and pulled out a card, simple, black, with a phone number in silver. Nothing else. He held it out to her. If anyone gives you trouble, he said quietly, call this number. Naomi stared at the card, then at him. I don't. Take it. Not a request. She took it. His fingers brushed hers, brief, electric, and then he was turning away, guiding Dorothy toward the door. Daniel, Dorothy said softly, looking back at Naomi one last time. Remember what I told you. Kindness still exists. You just have to know where to look. He didn't respond. But at the door, he paused. Glanced back. Their eyes met. And then he was gone, swallowed by the SUVs and the snow and the world he lived in, a world so far from hers it might as well have been another planet. Naomi stood alone in the empty diner, the black card still warm in her hand. She didn't understand why he cared. But she kept the card. Daniel Kwan didn't sleep that night. He sat in his penthouse office, 60 floors above the city, watching the snow-covered skyline glitter in the darkness. The Chicago he controlled sprawled beneath him. The South Side, the West Side, parts of downtown that pretended to be clean but answered to him in the shadows. But his mind wasn't on business. It was on her. Naomi Thompson. He'd run the name through his head 100 times since leaving that diner. The way she'd looked at him, not with the fear he was used to, not with the desperate hunger of someone wanting something from him. Just steady. Calm. Like she was taking his measure and deciding whether he was worth her time. No one looked at him like that. No one had in years. Sir. Daniel turned. Yong-ho, his right hand, stood in the doorway with a tablet in his hands. Efficient as always. The file you requested. Daniel took the tablet, dismissing Yong-ho with a nod. Then he settled into his chair and began to read. Naomi Thompson. 27 years old. Born and raised on Chicago's South Side. Mother in assisted living, early onset dementia complicated by a mental breakdown. Father absent since she was 12. And then he found it. Deshaun Thompson. Younger brother. Killed 4 years ago in a drive-by shooting. 18 years old. Wrong place, wrong time. The bullet had been meant for a gang member 3 feet away. Deshawn had been walking home from a friend's house. Daniel stared at the photo attached to the file. A young man with a bright smile, headphones around his neck, eyes full of the kind of hope that didn't survive long in neighborhoods like that. Dead at 18. The medical bills had been catastrophic. 3 surgeries. 2 weeks in intensive care. None of it enough to save him. The hospital had pursued the debt aggressively, $68,000, now grown to $73,000 with interest. Naomi had been paying it down slowly, month by month, for 4 years. She'd been accepted into a nursing program before her brother died. Had to drop out when the bills came. Never went back. Daniel scrolled further. Current employment. Rose's Diner. Double shifts, 6 days a week. Sends money to her mother's facility every month. Lives alone in a 1-bedroom apartment 4 blocks from the diner. And then the part that made his jaw tighten. Recent incidents. 3 months ago, members of the web organization approached the diner's owner about using the location for distribution. Owner refused. Since then, there have been reports of harassment targeting the night shift waitress, Naomi Thompson. Marcus Webb. Daniel set the tablet down slowly, his mind clicking through the implications. Marcus Webb was a problem he'd been meaning to deal with. A mid-level dealer who'd gotten ambitious, started pushing into territory that belonged to the Quan organization, recruiting young soldiers with promises of easy money and fast power. Daniel had been content to let him overextend himself, to wait until the right moment to crush him. But now Marcus Webb was threatening a woman who had wrapped Daniel's mother in her own coat and fed her soup while a blizzard raged outside. That changed things. He picked up his phone. Dialed. Yong-ho. I want eyes on Rose's Diner. Around the clock. Anyone from Webb's crew gets within a block, I want to know about it. Understood, sir. Anything else? Daniel paused. Have my car ready in an hour. He hung up before Yong-ho could ask questions. The diner looked different in daylight. Still worn, still tired, but there was something warm about it too. The way the sun caught the old chrome fixtures. The smell of coffee and bacon drifting through the door. The hand-painted sign in the window that said, "Everyone welcome." Daniel sat in his SUV for a long moment, watching through the tinted glass. She was inside. He could see her moving between tables, coffee pot in hand, saying something that made an old man in a corner booth laugh. She smiled. A real smile, the kind that reached her eyes, and something twisted in Daniel's chest. She's good, he thought. She's everything I'm not. He got out of the car before he could talk himself out of it. The bell jingled when he walked in. Conversation stuttered. The old man in the corner looked up, recognition flashing across his face, then fear. He dropped his gaze immediately, suddenly very interested in his coffee. But Naomi just straightened, her smile fading into something cautious. Guarded. Mr. Quan. Daniel. He approached the counter slowly, giving her space. I wanted to thank you. Properly. For what you did for my mother. You already thanked me. I gave you a business card. That's not a thank you. She set the coffee pot down, studying him with those steady eyes. Then what is it? A leash, part of him thought. A way to keep you close. A claim. Insurance, he said instead. In case you ever need help. I don't need your kind of help. The words were quiet, but they landed like a slap. She knew what he was. What he did. And she wasn't going to pretend otherwise. Daniel should have been offended. Instead, he was impressed. You've been having trouble, he said. Men coming around. Making threats. Her expression flickered, surprise, then wariness. How do you know about that? I know a lot of things. He leaned against the counter, keeping his voice low. The other customers were pretending not to listen, but he knew better. The men bothering you, they work for someone named Marcus Webb. He's trying to expand his operation into this neighborhood. Your diner is in his way. Naomi's jaw tightened. What does that have to do with you? Everything, Daniel thought. Because Marcus Webb is my enemy. Because you're caught in a war you don't even know exists. Because I haven't been able to stop thinking about you since I walked out that door. Webb and I have history, he said carefully. He's not someone you want to deal with alone. I've been dealing with things alone my whole life. I know. The words came out softer than he intended. I read your file. Her eyes flashed, anger, violation, something he couldn't name. You investigated me. I investigate everyone. I'm not everyone. I'm a waitress who gave your mom some soup. No. Daniel held her gaze, refusing to look away. You're not. The silence stretched between them, thick with things unsaid. The old man in the corner coughed nervously. Someone's fork scraped against a plate. Finally, Naomi spoke. Why are you really here, Mr. Kwan? Daniel considered lying. Considered walking away. Considered 100 different responses that would keep her at a safe distance, that would maintain the walls he'd spent 7 years building. Instead, he told her the truth. I don't know yet. She stared at him for a long moment. Then, slowly, she picked up the coffee pot. You want some coffee while you figure it out? It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't trust. But it was something. Daniel sat down at the counter. Yeah, he said quietly. I do. It started with the windows. Naomi arrived at the diner on a Tuesday morning to find them shattered, glass scattered across the sidewalk like scattered teeth. The word, cooperate, had been spray-painted across the door in blood-red letters, dripping down the wood like a wound. She stood there for a long moment, her keys frozen in her hand, her breath fogging in the cold air. Then she got a broom and started cleaning. Mr. Patterson came by an hour later, saw the damage, and shook his head. Maybe we should think about what they're asking, Naomi. It's not worth getting hurt over. It's not happening, she said flatly. Not in this diner. He left without arguing. They both knew he wouldn't fight for this place. It was just a business to him, a failing one at that. If it burned down tomorrow, he'd collect the insurance and move on. But to Naomi, it was more than that. It was the only thing she had left. The windows were boarded up by afternoon. She worked her shift like nothing had happened, smiling at customers, refilling coffee, pretending her hands weren't shaking every time the door opened. That night, she walked home alone. The footsteps started half a block from her apartment. She didn't turn around. Didn't run. Just kept walking, her keys clutched between her fingers like her mother had taught her, her heart pounding so hard she could taste it. The footsteps got closer. Hey, sweetheart. She walked faster. A hand grabbed her arm, spinning her around. 2 men. Young, hard-eyed, wearing the kind of casual cruelty that came from having power over people who couldn't fight back. Boss wants an answer, one of them said. You've had time to think. Naomi yanked her arm free. My answer is the same. No. The second man stepped closer, crowding her against a parked car. Wrong answer. Then I guess you'll have to kill me. Her voice shook, but she didn't look away. Because I'm not turning that diner into a drug front. Not today. Not ever. They stared at her. She stared back. Then, impossibly, one of them laughed. You've got guts, he said. Too bad guts don't stop bullets. He leaned in close, his breath hot on her face. You've got until Friday. After that, we stop asking nice. They walked away, leaving her trembling against the car, alone in the dark. The next 3 days were hell. They followed her everywhere. To work. To the grocery store. To her mother's facility. She'd had to cancel her visit when she spotted the car parked outside, too terrified to lead them to the one person she had left. She stopped sleeping. Stopped eating. Jumped at every sound, every shadow, every creak of the old building settling around her. By Thursday night, she was running on nothing but coffee and fear. The diner was empty, everyone had cleared out early, as if they could sense the storm coming. Naomi stood behind the counter, staring at the boarded-up windows, wondering if this was how it ended. If tomorrow they'd find her body in the alley, just another casualty of a neighborhood that had already taken so much from her. The door opened. She grabbed the baseball bat before she even looked up. But it wasn't Webb's men. It was Daniel Kwan. He stepped inside, snowflakes melting in his dark hair, his eyes scanning the diner before landing on her. On the bat in her hands. "Put that down," he said quietly. "You won't need it." "What are you doing here?" "Handling things." He crossed to the window, peeling back the edge of the plywood to look outside. "Starting tonight, you're under my protection." Naomi's grip tightened on the bat. "I didn't ask for your protection." "I know." He turned to face her, and for the first time, she saw something other than ice in his eyes. Something almost human. "But you're getting it anyway." "Why?" The word tore out of her, raw and desperate. "Why do you care? I'm nobody to you. I'm just. You saved my mother's life. I gave her soup and a blanket. That's not." She smiled. Daniel's voice dropped, rough with something she couldn't name. "When I brought her home that night, she smiled. Talked about you for hours. About your kindness. Your warmth." He took a step closer. "My mother hasn't smiled in 7 years. Not since my father died. Not since I became this." Naomi stared at him, the bat slowly lowering. "I've given her everything," he continued. "The best doctors. The best care. A penthouse with a view of the whole city. And none of it made her smile. But you, a stranger, in a rundown diner, during a blizzard, you gave her something I couldn't." "What?" "Hope." The word seemed to cost him something. "She thinks you're proof that kindness still exists. That the world isn't as dark as I've made it." Naomi didn't know what to say. Didn't know what to do with this man standing in front of her, this monster who everyone whispered about, looking at her like she was something precious. Something worth protecting. "I owe you a debt," Daniel said quietly. "I don't know how to repay it yet. But I can start by making sure Marcus Webb never touches you again. And if I don't want your help, then you're smarter than I gave you credit for." A ghost of a smile crossed his face, there and gone. "But you'll take it anyway. Because you're not stupid enough to die for pride." He was right. She hated that he was right. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now, you go home. Get some sleep. My men will be outside, you won't see them, but they'll see everything." He moved toward the door, then paused. "The threats will stop by morning. Webb will get the message." "What message?" Daniel looked back at her, and for a moment, she saw the man behind the monster. The son who had lost his father. The man who had lost himself. "That you belong to me now." The word should have terrified her. Should have sent her running. Instead, she felt something she hadn't felt in 4 years. Safe. He was gone before she could respond, swallowed by the night and the snow and the world he lived in. Naomi locked the door behind him, her hands still shaking. But when she walked home that night, no one followed her. And for the first time in a week, she slept. It became a ritual. Every night, after the last customer left and Naomi flipped the sign to "closed," Daniel would appear. Sometimes he came through the front door, the bell jingling like any ordinary customer. Sometimes he was just there when she turned around, sitting in the corner booth like he'd materialized from shadow. She should have been afraid. Should have told him to stop coming. Instead, she started leaving a pot of coffee warm for him. They didn't talk much at first. He would sit, she would clean, and the silence between them would stretch like a living thing, not uncomfortable, just present. Waiting. But slowly, over nights that turned into weeks, the silence began to crack. "Why do you work so hard?" Naomi looked up from wiping down the counter. Daniel was watching her with that unreadable expression, his hands wrapped around a coffee cup that had gone cold an hour ago. "Because I have to." "No. You work like you're punishing yourself." She stopped wiping. Set the rag down. Met his eyes. "Maybe I am." He didn't push. Didn't ask. Just waited, like he had all the time in the world. And somehow, in the quiet of that empty diner, the words started spilling out. "My brother Deshaun. He was 18 when he died. Bright. Funny. Had dreams bigger than this whole neighborhood." Her voice cracked, but she kept going. "He wanted to be a music producer. Used to beatbox everywhere he went, in the kitchen, on the bus, drove me crazy. But he was good. Really good." Daniel said nothing. Just listened. "The night he died, I was supposed to pick him up from a friend's house. But I was working a double shift. Told him to get a ride with someone else." She laughed, a broken, hollow sound. "He got in a car with some guys from the neighborhood. They drove through the wrong block at the wrong time. Bullet wasn't even meant for him. He was just there." Tears burned her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. "Not here. Not in front of him. I should have been there," she whispered. "If I'd just left work early. If I'd just. Then you'd be dead too." The words hit her like a slap. She looked up, startled. Daniel's eyes were steady on hers. Not cold anymore. Something rawer, something that understood. "The bullet was random," he said quietly. "You couldn't have stopped it. You would have just been in the car when it happened." He paused. "And my mother would have frozen to death in that storm." Naomi stared at him, something shifting in her chest. A crack in the wall she'd built around that guilt, that endless, crushing guilt that had been suffocating her for 4 years. "You don't know that," she managed. "I know you're alive. And I know she's alive because of you." He set down his coffee cup. "Sometimes that's the only math that matters." The silence returned, but it was different now. Softer. Like something had broken open between them. "Your turn," she said finally. He raised an eyebrow. "You know my story now. What's yours? How does someone become?" She gestured vaguely at him. "This?" For a long moment, she thought he wouldn't answer. His jaw tightened, his eyes went distant, and the walls she'd watched him carry started to rise again. Then he spoke. "My father died when I was 19. Heart attack. No warning, no goodbye. One day he was teaching me to fix a car engine, the next he was gone." His voice was flat, controlled, but she could hear the cracks beneath the surface. "My mother, she fell apart. I had to be strong for both of us. Had to provide." "So you joined the organization?" "I was already adjacent to it. My father had connections, people he'd helped over the years, debts that were owed. After he died, they came to collect. Offered me a place." He looked down at his hands. "I told myself it was temporary. Just until I got us back on our feet. But the money was good. The power was better. And somewhere along the way, I stopped pretending I was going to leave. And your mother? She saw what I was becoming. Tried to stop me. I didn't listen. The words came harder now, dragged from somewhere deep. Eventually, she couldn't watch anymore. Said she didn't recognize her own son. Walked away. 7 years ago, Naomi said softly. 7 years ago. The weight of it hung between them, two people shaped by loss, twisted by grief, trying to find their way back to something human. She came back, Naomi offered. That has to mean something. Maybe. Daniel's voice was rough. Or maybe she just wanted to see if there was anything left to save. Is there? He looked at her then, really looked, with eyes that had seen terrible things and done worse. Eyes that held more pain than any one person should have to carry. I don't know, he admitted. I haven't been sure in a long time. Naomi reached across the table, slowly, giving him time to pull away. He didn't. Her hand covered his, warm against cold, soft against scarred. I think there is, she said quietly. I think that's why you keep coming here. He didn't respond. But he didn't pull away either. They sat like that, hands touching, silence stretching, two wounded people finding something unexpected in the wreckage of their lives. Across the city, in a penthouse overlooking the lake, Dorothy Caldwell stood at the window, watching the snow fall. Her nurse had shown her photos on Daniel's phone. Security footage from the diner, her son sitting across from a young woman with kind eyes and a gentle smile. They were talking. Laughing, even. Daniel was laughing. Dorothy pressed a hand to her heart, tears slipping down her weathered cheeks. She'd prayed for 7 years. Prayed for something to reach him, to crack the ice that had frozen around her boy's heart. And now, watching him smile at a waitress in a rundown diner, she finally understood. God answered prayers in strange ways. Sometimes through blizzards. Sometimes through kind young women with brave hearts. And sometimes, just sometimes, through the simple miracle of two broken people finding each other in the dark. Dorothy smiled, the first real smile in 7 years. Her son was coming back to her. Marcus Webb was not a patient man. He'd built his operation on violence and fear, rising through Chicago's underworld by being more brutal, more ruthless, more willing to cross lines that others wouldn't touch. He'd carved out territory block by block, body by body, and he wasn't about to let some diner waitress and Daniel Kwan's sudden attack of conscience stop him. So he watched. And he waited. And when he saw how often Daniel's car appeared outside Rose's diner, how long it stayed, how his rival emerged looking almost human, he smiled. He'd found Daniel Kwan's weakness. Now he just had to break it. The first sign came on a Wednesday. Naomi was walking to work when a car pulled up beside her. Slow, deliberate, matching her pace. The window rolled down, and a face she didn't recognize leaned out. Pretty thing like you shouldn't be walking alone. Dangerous neighborhood. She kept walking. Didn't respond. Your boyfriend can't protect you forever, sweetheart. Sooner or later, he'll slip. And when he does. Naomi ducked into a corner store, heart pounding, and waited until the car drove away. She didn't tell Daniel. The second sign came 3 days later. Shauna, her coworker, called in sick, voice shaking, barely coherent. Someone followed me home last night, Naomi. They knew my name. They knew where my kids go to school. Shauna quit the next day. So did Marcus, the cook. By the end of the week, Naomi was working alone, jumping at every shadow, flinching at every sound. She still didn't tell Daniel. The third sign broke her. Her phone rang at 2 a.m., the facility where her mother lived. Miss Thompson. We've been receiving calls. Threatening calls. Someone saying, saying terrible things about what will happen to your mother if you don't cooperate with them. Naomi's blood turned to ice. Is she okay? Is she safe? She's fine, but we're concerned. If this continues, we may need to consider. Don't. Her voice cracked. Don't do anything. I'll handle it. I'll. She hung up before the tears came. Mama. They were going after Mama. The one person she had left. The woman who didn't even remember her own name most days, who lived in a fog of confusion and fear, who Naomi had spent 4 years working herself to the bone to protect. They were using her as leverage. And Naomi couldn't hide anymore. Daniel found her at the diner an hour later. She was sitting in the dark, the lights off, the closed sign up, her face streaked with tears she hadn't bothered to wipe away. When he walked in, she didn't look up. I heard. His voice was low, controlled, but she could feel the rage simmering beneath the surface. Webb crossed a line. They're targeting my mother. The words came out hollow. She doesn't even know who I am most days, Daniel. She can't protect herself. She doesn't understand. I'll move her somewhere safe. Somewhere they'll never find her. And then what? Naomi finally looked up, her eyes red-rimmed and blazing. They go after someone else. They burn down the diner. They come for me directly. She laughed, a broken, terrible sound. This doesn't end until someone stops it. I'm going to stop it. Daniel's jaw was tight, his hands clenched at his sides. But you need to leave the city until I do. I have a place upstate, isolated, secure. No. Naomi. No. She stood, facing him with the same stubborn defiance that had made her refuse Webb's demands from the beginning. I've spent 4 years hiding. Hiding from my grief. Hiding from my guilt. Hiding from everything that reminded me of Deshawn. Her voice shook, but she didn't stop. I won't run anymore. Not from this. Not from them. This isn't about running. This is about survival. Then I'll survive here. On my own terms. You'll die here. The words exploded out of him, raw and ragged, tearing through the careful control he always maintained. And for the first time, Naomi saw it, the fear beneath the fury. He wasn't angry at her. He was terrified of losing her. Daniel. I can't, he stopped. Swallowed. Started again, his voice cracking in ways she'd never heard before. I've lost everyone I've ever cared about. My father. My mother, for 7 years, I lost her too. I can't watch someone else die. He didn't finish. He didn't have to. Naomi moved without thinking. Crossed the space between them. Grabbed the front of his coat and pulled him down to her. The kiss was desperate. Forbidden. Inevitable. He tasted like coffee and cold air and something darker, something dangerous. His hands came up to cup her face, gentle despite the violence she knew they were capable of. And for one perfect, broken moment, everything else fell away, the threats, the fear, the walls they'd both built to protect themselves from exactly this. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, foreheads pressed together, Naomi whispered the truth she'd been fighting for weeks. I'm not going anywhere. You should. His voice was rough, wrecked. You should run as far from me as possible. Probably. She pulled back just enough to meet his eyes. But I'm done running. Whatever's coming, we face it together. He stared at her, this woman who had every reason to fear him, every reason to walk away, and instead stood her ground like she was the dangerous one. Together, he repeated, like he was testing the word. Like he'd forgotten what it meant. Together. The word hung between them, a promise and a warning all at once. Outside, the city slept, unaware of the storm gathering in its shadows. Marcus Webb was coming. And when he did, he wouldn't find a frightened woman hiding behind a mafia boss's protection. He'd find two people with nothing left to lose, and everything to fight for. They took her on a Thursday. Naomi was locking up the diner, keys in hand, mind already drifting to the conversation she'd had with Daniel that morning. He'd wanted her to stay at his penthouse, just for a few days, just until he dealt with Webb. She'd refused, stubborn as always. She was beginning to think that was a mistake. The van came out of nowhere. Tires screeching. Doors sliding open. Hands grabbing her before she could scream. She fought. Kicked. Clawed at the arms dragging her backward. But there were too many of them, 3, maybe 4, and they were strong, practiced, brutal. A hood came down over her head, plunging her into darkness. Zip ties bit into her wrists. And then she was thrown onto cold metal, the van door slamming shut, the engine roaring to life. She didn't scream. Didn't cry. Didn't beg. Instead, she listened. Left turn. Then right. The rumble of train tracks beneath the tires. The distant sound of water, a river, maybe. The faint smell of rust and rot and something chemical, like old machinery. They drove for maybe 20 minutes. Then the van stopped, and rough hands dragged her out into cold air that smelled like mildew and decay. The hood came off. She was in a warehouse. Abandoned, clearly, broken windows, rusted equipment, concrete floors stained with things she didn't want to identify. A single bare bulb hung from the ceiling, casting harsh shadows across the faces of the men surrounding her. And in the center of it all, sitting in a folding chair like a king on a throne, was Marcus Webb. He was younger than she expected. Mid-30s, maybe. Handsome in a cruel way, with cold eyes and a smile that didn't reach them. He wore an expensive jacket over a plain white t-shirt, like he couldn't decide if he wanted to be a businessman or a thug. Naomi Thompson. He said her name like he was tasting it. You know, you've caused me a lot of trouble. She said nothing. Just stared at him with the same steady defiance she'd shown his men weeks ago. I offered you a simple deal. Let us use your diner, make some easy money, everybody wins. But you had to be difficult. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. And then you had to go and make friends with Daniel Kwan. I didn't ask for his protection. No. But you got it anyway. Marcus's smile widened. Which makes you valuable. See, Daniel's been a thorn in my side for years. Thinks he's untouchable. Thinks his organization is too big for someone like me to challenge. He stood, circling her slowly. But everyone has a weakness. And you, sweetheart, are his. Naomi's heart pounded, but she kept her voice steady. If you think he'll come running for me, you don't know him very well. Oh, he'll come. Marcus stopped in front of her, tilting her chin up with one finger. Men like Daniel. They pretend they don't feel anything. But the second someone threatens what's theirs, all that control disappears. His grip tightened painfully. And you're definitely his. She spat in his face. The slap came fast and hard, snapping her head to the side, filling her mouth with the copper taste of blood. But she didn't cry out. Didn't give him the satisfaction. Feisty. Marcus wiped his face with the back of his hand. I see why he likes you. He walked away, pulling out his phone. Make the call. Tell Kwan we have his girl. He wants her back alive, he comes alone. Midnight. No negotiation. As his men moved around her, Naomi's mind raced. 20 minutes from the diner. Train tracks. River smell. Abandoned warehouse with chemical odor, probably industrial district, near the water. She filed away every detail, every scrap of information. Then she noticed the broken glass near her feet. Small shards, scattered across the concrete. She shifted her weight, carefully pressing her shoe into the dust, leaving a print. Then another. Creating a pattern, 3 lines, like an arrow, pointing toward the window. If anyone came looking, they'd know which way she'd gone. She just had to stay alive long enough for them to find her. Across the city, Daniel Kwan was tearing the world apart. His men flooded the streets, shaking down every contact, every informant, every lowlife who might know where Webb had taken her. The diner was a crime scene, her keys still lying on the sidewalk where they'd fallen, and Daniel stood in the middle of it feeling something he hadn't felt in years. Terror. "We're checking every warehouse, every safe house," Yong-ho reported. "But Webb has dozens of properties. It could take hours to." "We don't have hours." His phone buzzed. Unknown number. Kwan. Marcus's voice, smug and satisfied. "I have something of yours." Daniel's grip tightened until he felt the phone case crack. "If you touch her." Midnight. The old Harmon steel plant. "Come alone, or she dies screaming." The line went dead. Daniel was already moving when a voice stopped him. "Daniel." He turned. His mother stood in the doorway, her nurse hovering anxiously behind her. Dorothy's eyes were clear, sharper than they'd been in weeks. "Mom, I don't have time." "The warehouse." Dorothy's voice was urgent, focused. "Naomi told me about it. When she was talking about her brother, about the neighborhood. She said there was an old warehouse near the river where kids used to play." "Where, Deshawn?" "Where?" "Harmon Steel. She said her brother used to explore there before." Dorothy's eyes filled with tears. "Find her, Daniel. Bring her home." He crossed the room in 2 strides and kissed her forehead. "I will." Naomi heard them before she saw them. Gunshots. Shouting. The sound of chaos erupting outside the warehouse doors. Marcus's smug expression crumbled. "What the?" The doors exploded inward. Daniel came through like a force of nature, his men flooding in behind him. The gunfire was deafening, the violence swift and brutal. Marcus's men fell one by one, outmatched and outgunned. And then it was just Marcus, backing away, reaching for his weapon. Daniel was faster. The shot echoed through the warehouse, and Marcus Webb crumpled to the concrete, his reign of terror ending in a single, final breath. Then Daniel was there, cutting the zip ties from Naomi's wrists, pulling her into his arms. "I've got you," he breathed against her hair. "I've got you." She clung to him, shaking, bleeding, alive. "I knew you'd come," she whispered. "Always." His voice cracked. "Always." Outside, sirens wailed in the distance. But in that moment, in that warehouse full of blood and death and broken things, 2 people held each other like the world had finally stopped trying to tear them apart. The nightmares came every night for 2 weeks. Naomi would wake gasping, the phantom sensation of zip ties cutting into her wrists, Marcus Webb's cold smile burned into her memory. Daniel was always there. Sometimes in the chair beside her bed at the penthouse where she was recovering, sometimes pacing the hallway like a caged animal. He barely slept. She could see it in the shadows under his eyes, the tension in his jaw that never quite released. The guilt was eating him alive. "This is my fault," he said one night, standing at the window, his back to her. "I brought this on you. My world. My enemies." Marcus Webb made his own choices. Naomi's voice was still hoarse, but steady. "And so did you. You came for me. You saved me. I killed for you." He turned, and the anguish in his eyes stole her breath. "I've killed before, more times than I can count. But this was different. This was rage. Pure, uncontrollable rage." He looked down at his hands. "I became everything I swore I'd never be. Everything my mother couldn't forgive. Naomi pushed herself up, ignoring the protest of her bruised ribs. Daniel. She was right to walk away. His voice cracked. 7 years ago, when she looked at me and said she didn't recognize her own son, she was right. I became a monster. You're not a monster. You don't know what I've done. I know who you are. She crossed the room slowly, stopping in front of him. I know you visit your mother every day now, even when she doesn't remember who you are. I know you stayed by my bed every night while I was recovering. I know you cried. She reached up, touching his face. You cried when you thought I was asleep. His jaw tightened. That doesn't erase. No. It doesn't. Her voice was gentle but firm. But it proves you're still human. Still capable of love. Still capable of change. She held his gaze. The question is, what are you going to do about it? He stared at her for a long moment. Then, slowly, something shifted in his eyes. Not the ice. Not the cold control. Something softer. Something that looked almost like hope. The changes started small. Daniel began delegating the operations he'd always handled personally, the violent ones, the ones that required the monster he'd become. Yong-ho and his other lieutenants were capable, trustworthy. They could handle it. He started attending legitimate business meetings instead. The Kwan organization had always had legal fronts, real estate, import, export, restaurants, but they'd been afterthoughts, covers for the real money. Now Daniel began investing in them seriously. Hiring actual managers. Building something that could exist in daylight. His accountants thought he was having a breakdown. His enemies thought he was getting soft. Neither understood that he was fighting for something more important than territory or power. He was fighting for his soul. The envelope arrived 3 weeks after the warehouse. Naomi found it on the counter of her apartment, the one she'd finally returned to, despite Daniel's protests. Plain white, no return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper. A receipt from Chicago General Hospital. Debt balance, $0. She stared at it for a full minute, her hands shaking. $68,000. For years of double shifts, of exhaustion, of watching every penny while the interest climbed higher and higher. Gone. Erased like it had never existed. She was at the penthouse within the hour. You paid off my debt. Daniel looked up from his desk, unsurprised. I made an investment. $68,000 is not an investment. It's a business decision. He stood, circling the desk to face her. You can't build a future when you're drowning in the past. I removed an obstacle. That's all. That's not all, and you know it. Maybe not. His eyes softened, just barely. But it's the explanation I'm giving you. Take it or leave it. She wanted to argue. Wanted to insist on paying him back, on maintaining her independence, on not being another person who owed Daniel Kwan. But the weight that lifted from her shoulders. The weight she'd carried for 4 years, the weight that had crushed her dreams and stolen her sleep and made every day feel like survival instead of living, was too profound to deny. Thank you, she whispered. He nodded once. Don't mention it. Ever. Dorothy moved into the penthouse a week later. Daniel had an entire wing converted for her, soft colors, familiar furniture from her old apartment, a garden terrace with a view of the lake. He hired 3 nurses who specialized in dementia care, who treated her with patience and dignity even on the days when she didn't remember her own name. On her good days, Dorothy sat in the living room and watched her son work. Sometimes he'd look up and catch her smiling at him, and something would flicker across his face, surprise, maybe. Disbelief. Like he'd forgotten what it felt like to make her happy. You're different, she told him one afternoon, her eyes sharp and clear in a rare lucid moment. You're becoming the man your father always knew you could be. Daniel's composure cracked. He looked away, blinking rapidly. It's because of her, isn't it? Dorothy continued, her gaze drifting to where Naomi sat reading by the window. That girl. She's part of it. Only part. He was quiet for a long moment. Then, I got tired of being someone you couldn't love. Dorothy reached out and took his hand, something she hadn't done in 7 years. I never stopped loving you, she said softly. I just stopped recognizing you. But now. She squeezed his fingers. I see my son again. Daniel broke. It was quiet, a shuddering breath, a single tear escaping down his cheek, but it was more emotion than he'd shown in 7 years. More vulnerability than his empire had ever seen. Across the room, Naomi looked up from her book and watched the monster become a man. And for the first time in longer than she could remember, she let herself believe in second chances. Winter returned to Chicago with a gentleness that felt like forgiveness. The snow fell soft and slow, dusting the city in white, transforming the harsh edges of the south side into something almost beautiful. Naomi watched it from the window of Rose's diner, her diner now, the papers signed and framed on the wall of her tiny back office, and smiled. 3 months had passed since the warehouse. 3 months since Marcus Webb's blood had stained the concrete. 3 months since Daniel Kwon had held her in his arms and promised her always. Everything had changed. And yet, somehow, the things that mattered had stayed exactly the same. She still worked the morning shift, still poured coffee for Earl and his endless stories, still found peace in the rhythm of plates and orders and customers who became family. The diner was hers now. Daniel had made that happen too, though he'd never admit it, but she ran it the same way she always had. With warmth. With kindness. With the memory of her grandmother whispering, "You never turn away someone in need." Her phone buzzed. A text from Daniel. Rooftop. Sunset. Where's something warm? She smiled, her heart doing that ridiculous flutter it still did whenever his name appeared on her screen. 3 months, and he still made her feel like a teenager with her first crush. Some things, she was learning, didn't fade with time. They only grew deeper. The rooftop was stunning at sunset. Daniel had transformed it, strings of warm lights crisscrossing overhead, a small table set with candles and champagne, the Chicago skyline glittering gold and pink in the fading light. Snow fell around them like something from a dream, catching in Naomi's hair, melting on her cheeks. He was waiting for her by the railing, his back to the city, his eyes only on her. "You're beautiful," he said quietly as she approached. "You're up to something." A ghost of a smile. Maybe. He took her hands, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. The nervous gesture surprised her. Daniel Kwon didn't get nervous. He commanded boardrooms and controlled empires and had once made her believe he was made of ice. But here, now, with snowflakes catching in his dark hair, he looked almost vulnerable. 3 months ago, he began, his voice rougher than usual, "I was a man who had lost everything that mattered. My mother. My humanity. Any hope of being someone worth loving." He paused, swallowing. "And then a blizzard brought me to a diner on the south side, where a woman I'd never met had wrapped my mother in her own coat and fed her soup." Naomi's eyes burned, but she didn't look away. "You saved her life that night. But you saved mine too." His grip tightened on her hands. "You showed me that kindness still exists. That I could still be someone worth knowing. Worth." He stopped. Started again. "Worth loving." He reached into his coat and pulled out a small velvet box. Naomi's breath caught. "I know I'm not the man you dreamed of," Daniel said, opening the box to reveal a ring, gold band, simple and elegant, with a stone the color of warm honey glowing in the fading light. "I know I come with baggage and enemies and a past that would send any sane woman running. But I also know that I will spend the rest of my life trying to deserve you. He looked up at her, those dark eyes she'd once thought were made of ice now shining with something that looked terrifyingly like hope. Naomi Thompson, will you marry me? She stared at the ring. At him. At the city sparkling below them and the snow falling around them and the impossible, beautiful reality of this moment. I have conditions, she heard herself say. His lips twitched. Of course you do. I keep my name. Done. I keep working at the diner. My diner. I wouldn't expect anything else. And you keep moving toward legitimacy. No backsliding. No, just this once. You become the man your mother sees when she looks at you. Daniel's expression softened. That's the plan. Then yes. The word came out thick with tears. Yes, I'll marry you. He slid the ring onto her finger, a perfect fit, warm against her skin. And then he was kissing her, gentle and fierce all at once, snowflakes melting between them as the city lights flickered below. The celebration was small. Intimate. Just Daniel, Naomi, Dorothy, and a few trusted members of Daniel's inner circle. They gathered in a penthouse living room, champagne flowing, laughter warming the space. Naomi found herself standing by the window, watching the snow fall, when Dorothy appeared beside her. It's beautiful, isn't it? The older woman said, her voice clear and steady. One of her good days. It is. Naomi smiled. Thank you, Dorothy. For everything. For what, dear? For wandering into my diner that night. Naomi turned to face her. I keep thinking about how different things might have been if you hadn't gotten lost in that storm. Dorothy's expression shifted. A small, mysterious smile played at her lips. Who says I wandered? Naomi blinked. What do you mean? Dorothy took her hand, her grip surprisingly strong. I prayed for someone to save my son. For months, I prayed. I watched him disappear into that darkness, and I begged God to send him something, someone, who could reach him. Her eyes glistened. And then, during that storm, something told me to walk. I didn't know where I was going. But I knew, I'd find what I was looking for. Naomi's heart stuttered. You came to the diner on purpose? I came to the diner on faith. Dorothy squeezed her hand. God answers prayers in strange ways, dear. Sometimes through blizzards. Sometimes through kind young women with brave hearts. She smiled, tears slipping down her weathered cheeks. You were my answer, Naomi. You saved my son. Naomi couldn't speak. Could barely breathe. Whether divine intervention, dementia, or a mother's desperate hope, Dorothy had found exactly who her son needed. I'll keep your secret, Naomi whispered finally. Dorothy's smile widened. I know you will, dear. That's why I told you. Later, as the celebration wound down and the snow continued to fall outside, Daniel pulled Naomi onto the small dance floor he'd cleared in the living room. No music. Just the soft hush of snow against the windows and the distant hum of the city below. What were you and my mother talking about? He asked, his arms wrapped around her waist. Naomi smiled up at him. Just about how lucky you are. I know exactly how lucky I am. He pressed his forehead to hers. I found you. She thought of Dorothy's secret. Of prayers answered in blizzards. Of a mother's love that had never stopped fighting, even when her son had given up on himself. Some secrets were worth keeping. I found you too, she whispered. And as snow fell over Chicago, blanketing the city in white, two people who had once been broken danced in the quiet, their hearts finally whole. A perfect circle. A story written in snow and second chances. Let me ask you something. Have you ever helped someone without expecting anything in return, and then watched it change your whole life? Have you ever met someone who saw the real you, not the mask, not the struggle, but the person underneath? Tell me your story in the comments. I read every single one. And if Naomi and Daniel's journey made you feel something, please drop your comments, hit subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss another incredible story.